Bleeding the brakes on a motorcycle can sometimes be a little bit challenging. It's kind of different from bleeding the brakes on your truck or your car or whatever. You can't just get someone to pump them while you, while you trap the air out of a hose. You need to kind of take advantage of a couple different techniques, just because the way that brakes are set up in a motorcycle is a little bit different than in a car. What we have here is a 1981 KZ 440. Obviously it's been ragged up a little bit. You got all this kind of junk here. That's always a bad sign. And so while I'm waiting for parts to come in the mail, I decided that I'd try and bleed the brakes because they're a little bit mushy. Now there's two methods of bleeding the brakes that I know of, and one of them is definitely a lot easier than the other one. The first one, which is the more difficult method, which I don't really do anymore, is it's actually pretty easy. All you really need is an 8mm wrench here, and all you gotta do is you hold in the brake line, or the brake handle, as hard as you can. Go on down here and release it, and let all the air or liquid or whatever squirt out. Once it's done squirting, you tighten it up again and then release the handle like that. And you might have to do that, I don't know, 5, 10, 20 times just to work all the bubbles all the way down here and then out here. It has produced some mixed results with me. If I'm just trying to work out like 1 or 2 bubbles in a line, if it's just a little bit mushy, then sometimes I'll use this. But if I have to change the line, let's say my line here is cracked and I have to change it and refill it full of fluid, it's just, I mean, it's just impossible. It takes way too long. So this is what I do. If I need to put a whole new brake system in a bike or whatever, or I have to fill the whole thing up with fluid, this is what I do. First off, I install everything. I get my calipers all in there with my brake pads and everything. I tighten down the line and everything. Presumably this is a good line. I've got my master cylinder here. Bring it full of fluid and everything. And just install everything, because it's a lot easier to do when it's on the bike rather than bench bleeding it. If my line is empty, sometimes what I'll do is I'll take the line and I'll stick it inside of my bottle of brake fluid here, and then I'll just put my lips around the other side and suck it all the way up to fill up the line. Don't worry about that. Brake fluid is kind of nasty stuff. It tastes really bitter, but if you get a little bit on your lips, it's not going to hurt you. What it does actually is it makes your lips numb for a little while. But I mean, it's not cyanide. Don't worry about it. I've done this tons of times. It doesn't hurt. So fill up the line. I might take I have a small syringe for this purpose, but I'll take a syringe and fill up the slave cylinder reservoir. Just fill all this up with fluid, and it's just a little bit easier. You can take out the bleeder valve, or you can take out this banjo bolt here and fill it up with fluid. So just getting things more or less filled up is a lot easier than trying to do this process with everything empty. The next thing I like to use is this little handheld vacuum pump. I got this thing actually to work on petcocks and carburetors, but it works really good for bleeding brake lines too. It's got this reservoir here, so that when I suck all the fluid out of the line from this end, it all collects in the reservoir here. It doesn't damage the pump. So now I'm going to show you guys this thing in action. So you take it, loosen up your bleeder valve there, hook it up to the line, and just start pumping away. I like to hold the reservoir so that it is above the level of the bleeder, and that way it gets all the bubbles out. Be sure to replenish your master cylinder, because you don't want to suck air into there. So what I normally do is I have the bottle in one hand and the pump in the other hand, and I just sort of dribble into there while I pump on it. And you just pump and pump and pump. It's a little bit easier if you have clear lines. These ones just came with these black ones, so that's what I'm using. But if you have clear lines, you can see when the bubbles stop coming up and it's just clear fluid, and that way you know that you're done. And you can tighten up your bleeder valve here, and you're all set. Alright, yeah, so now my brake lever is good and firm. Stops the bike real well, which will come in handy once I get this bike started. Guys, remember that if you dribble anything onto your tank or onto plastics or anything, be sure to clean up right away, because brake fluid is really good for taking paint off and destroying plastics and stuff like that. So I got a couple drops there. I'm going to go ahead and hit that with some water. Make sure it doesn't take off what's left of that paint job. And there you go.